You're listening to the So What? Why It Matters podcast with Nancy Hicks. Each week we'll ask the question, so what? And dive into the answers of why it matters with Nancy and her guest. Are you ready for some honest conversation about the so what's in your life? Then let's get to it. Here's Nancy.
Hi there, Nancy Hicks here. Welcome back to So What? Why It Matters. Today, we're bringing you our last episode in the Better Communication series. And let me tell you, what a time we've had together. I'm excited because we've been able to bring you people like Sean Killinger from QVC, who I worked with for years, who helped us understand better listening skills. I loved talking to Morgan Harper Nichols about staying open and curious. And what about Andy Crouch and his discussion around technology today and how we engage in that sphere that I call the modern marketplace. And now today, we have Cece Jones-Davis. I think one of the things about this series that's been so vital, and through these guests, we've been able to see these different aspects of communication, better communication. And let me tell you, I have got so many other facets of communication that I want to bring to you. So just look forward to series ahead. But for where we are today, I think if you take all of these episodes and you begin to actually work them in, that you actually begin to see why it matters so much that we're listening better. It all comes back to and all comes down to the desire to stay or to become connected. And for me, that's bigger than ever, I think, in this day and age that we're living in, where there's just so much fear and so much clutter and clamor. I just think we need to really, really hone in on these skills. So, today, we're turning our thoughts and our attention towards something that sounds simple, but it's anything but. We're talking about how to say what you mean and live it. So let me put it another way. It's walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Now, you might be thinking, Nancy, why are you talking about the things we do? Isn't communication about the things that we say? Well, yes and no. Don't forget, the biggest so what for becoming a good communicator is forging connections with people, like I mentioned a moment ago, because God made us for connection. And God did that so that we could love each other and take care of each other while we're here. And of course, you know, taking the example of I love you is not just words we say. I love you is about verbs, and there needs to be congruency here. So you've had this happen, right? Someone's pontificating about God. They're quoting scripture out the wazoo. You see this on social media, but there's such anger. There's such emotional and spiritual schizophrenia happening. You're like, wait a second, you're saying you're all about, let's take, women in leadership roles in the church. You're all about it. But by your actions or inaction, are you sure about that? You sure you're all about women in leadership roles in the church? So it's hard living up to that standard sometimes because, of course, we're human. We say what it means to love someone. We say that we're for or against certain things. But here's the thing. We often know what we're supposed to say. We know we should give our time and our service and our dollars to the people and causes that we care about. But sometimes we don't feel like doing those things. Sometimes it's just because we're tired or we're overwhelmed or we're burned out. And in our better moments, we say things like, I'm your friend, I'm your advocate, I'm your ally, I want to help. But sometimes when we're called to step up in that person's moment of need, it might not be very convenient for us. And we just don't show up. So our actions just don't back up our words. In those moments, when what we say doesn't line up with what we do, we sever the bonds of trust and we become disconnected and untethered from one another. Because when we don't have those bonds in place, we just drift. And I don't want that for me, and I don't want that for you. What does it look like to be a person who says what they mean and then does it? What are the sacrifices of that kind of life? And how does living with that kind of integrity help our relationships with each other blossom and grow? My guest today is someone who is going to help us unpack all of that. Her name is Cece Jones-Davis. And listen, she is a woman of integrity. She's incredible. Cece is an ordained minister. She's an advocate for women and girls and for criminal justice reform. She's a gifted singer and worship artist. And in fact, she just put out a beautiful new album called Alive, which is upbeat and life-giving. And don't we need that right now? And on top of all that, she's a wife. She's an entrepreneur and a mother of 2 adorable kids, a little girl named Halo and a little boy named Honor. Cece is the epitome of saying what you mean, then taking actionable steps to live it out. So let's get going. Here's my conversation with Cece Jones-Davis. Cece.
Nancy.
Honestly, what a pleasure to have you, to meet you here on Zoom and to learn about you and all that you have done and all that you are as a woman of integrity, of a woman of substance, of a woman who cares deeply about what she says and how she lives what she says. So I am really grateful that you're here with me today on So What? Why It Matters.
Nancy, thank you. I can't even tell you how special this is for me to meet you and to be asked to be a part of this show. I just really appreciate the work that you put out and the encouragement and inspiration you are committed to, particularly for women. Thank you so much for this honor.
Pleasure. So tell us right away, for the listener who's like, who is this Cece Jones-Davis woman? Who is she? Tell us who you are. And let's just start there. Tell us who you are.
Okay. Well, I always say that I'm a Southern girl first. I'm from the rural part of the state of Virginia. I grew up in really humble beginnings with really humble people, but I had such a village. My parents just established such a village for me and my sister of grandparents and aunties and uncles and friends who really just loved on us, took care of us, nurtured us, brought us along. I am a graduate of Howard, which is a historically African-American college. I'm a graduate of Yale Divinity School, where I went to learn about theology. And I'm a mom and a wife, and my calling in life, I mean, I feel like God calls us to different things at different moments in time. But I have been a worship leader for a really long time. Music is extremely important to me. And I'm a social advocate. And I think about myself as a person who has like one voice with 3 expressions. So I am a singer, a speaker, and a social advocate. And God has really called me to lead people toward Him through speaking and worship leading, but then to also lead us and highlight the least powerful through advocacy work. And so that's a little bit about me.
You are bringing it home for us today in terms of better communication. Say what you mean and live it. That's our topic. But I just think sometimes say what you mean. Well, part of the issues can be, I don't know what I mean because I didn't even know it was an issue. How does a woman like Cece Jones-Davis, how do we get to the point where we say what we mean in the first place? Here's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how we will say all kinds of things. We often use so many words, and sometimes we're saying, I'll give you an example, like, I'm going to pray for you, or I'll call you, right? That's just low level stuff. And we don't really mean it. Maybe we mean it, but I'm not going to follow through. Why do you think we say some of these things in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's mostly because of how we come up culturally, particularly women. We come up in a culture that really expects us to be nice, constantly nice. And so we want to say the nice thing. You know, we want to say the thing that will make someone else feel good. We want to do it because we want to be nice. And I think there is value in stepping back from what some of us have been kind of taught culturally and institutionally to say, okay, do I want to be nice or do I want to be good? Do I want to be nice or do I want to be authentic? Now, that doesn't mean that we just throw all of our, kind sensibilities out the window. It just means that we get to the bottom of what we actually want to be, which is good and honest and kind and decent. And a part of that is telling the truth, right? On the small things and on the big things, learning how to tell the truth. Because when we say, I'm going to call you, and we know we have no intentions of calling, we're not telling the truth. When we say, I love you, and we know that we don't love you, that's not telling the truth. I think that we have to adopt, particularly as women, a different kind of language and kind of divorce ourselves from so many of our social expectations to be nice all the time about everything, when in actuality, so much of that is really hollow, right? So much of that is really not adding to building meaningful relationships at all. And so I think we have to adopt new language. And I'll tell you what I think some of the new language needs to be.
Please.
I think some of the new language has to be language that helps us build boundaries in a kind way. And so instead of saying, oh, yeah, I'll be there and not showing up, being willing and able to say, you know what? I can't promise you that I'll be there. My heart will be with you, even if my body is not. I have a lot going on and I can't be everywhere, but I am with you in spirit and I wish your event really well. Or, instead of saying, I'll call you tomorrow. I don't actually know when I'm going to call you, but once time, opens up some, I will reach out as soon as I can. And one other thing I want to say about that, Nancy, is I don't know. I don't know. We are expected, particularly as women, to have all the answers to everything, particularly as women of faith. And we want to be the encouragers. We want to keep everybody lifted. We want to save the world. We need to adapt for our own sanity and to cancel ourselves from this culture of hollow niceness, this idea, this language of, I don't know. I don't know why that happened. I don't know when I will be available. I don't know what we're going to eat for dinner tomorrow night yet. I don't know. And I don't know is one of the most authentic, real statements I think we could ever make. And then after that, maybe we find the information, but we start with what is honest. And a lot of times that's, I don't know.
I absolutely love that, Cece. And I think that I know as a Bible teacher, I know we're both preachers, we're both speakers, we're both teachers of the scriptures. I have found, and I'm based on what you've just said, you and I would agree on this, that when you look, sometimes I'll look at a passage of scripture, for example, and I will actually start a Bible class reading a really complex passage. And then just stop and say, anybody have a problem with this? Anybody in the room feel like, what the heck? And then sometimes I'll even say, if you don't have a problem with this, if you feel like you have all the answers in a nutshell about a passage so complex, then we need to take a step back. So as a Bible teacher, I think one of the things we can often say is to say, theologians, historians, godly followers of Christ haven't settled this matter. We are not going to settle this matter today on women in the church, for example. We're not going to settle this matter today on eschatology. Pick your topic. But I think sometimes we feel like we have to have an answer, and we get ourselves into some little pretzel, don't you think? And then we're like,
absolutely
things, and it's like, really, are you sure? Are you sure you're going to land on that? And that's really what you mean. Are you sure?
Yes, I completely agree with you, Nancy. These are, when we're talking about spiritual issues, we're talking about theological issues. These are things that people have been grappling with for thousands of years at this point, hundreds of years. And I think it's okay for us to admit sometimes that we are still grappling with some things. We are still, as followers of Christ, trying to learn how to become more and more and more like Christ, right? That just because we were born whenever we were born doesn't make us the it generation. That God is still working and active through time, and we are a small part of it. And we see through glasses dimly, And I try to remember that myself all the time for myself, that listen, I can have my thoughts about this and thoughts about that, but I do see through a glass dimly because I am not God. And the Holy Spirit helps me to see better, but that doesn't mean I see it all. I
No.
don't see it all. And so I totally agree with you. We need to settle ourselves on the fact, the realization that we don't have all the answers. We have a Bible, but we don't understand. We're still trying to understand all that it says and all that it means. And we are still a church in evolution. We are a church in evolution.
I agree. And for people who are listening, who are like, I'm not a self-identified Christian, but I sure see the, as you mentioned, inauthenticity and the idea of telling the truth. Sometimes I feel like we would rather have the style over the substance. At least I can appear to have authority in this area. And I'm going to come on really strong and say all kinds of words and pontificate. But you step back and say, wait a second, unpack what you just said. You think about that. And I don't want to be condescending. I don't want to be, harsh, but to say, think about it. Are you sure that's where you land? Are you positive that's where you land? Because sometimes we don't even realize, we think we have a corner of the market. We cornered the market on truth, when God alone holds absolute truth. And you and I,
Preach.
right, have to be very humble before God and be careful with what we say to one another in the church, to what we say to others beyond the church walls, so that we really are, I love what you said, telling the truth.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
so I would love to talk. I'm sure this part will come up a little bit more too. I also find out, okay, let's just take it for a second, because sometimes, with people, sometimes people will say things like, oh, they'll make a statement. And maybe between the two of us, we can come up with one of those statements. They make a statement and you're like, ooh, that's highly offensive. And the person goes, well, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean anything by it. And you're like, no, but here's my experience of what you just said. Well, I didn't mean anything by it. Can you comment on that scenario? I didn't use a specific example, but you get what I'm talking about. And it crosses all kinds of issues.
Yeah. I think in terms of communicating, no matter what the relationship is, whether it's a mother and a daughter, a husband and a wife, sisters, co-workers, best friends, I think the issue of how we use words is always important to the value and the health of our relationships, right? And so I think it's so important for people to understand that what you mean is not as important as how the person feels about what was said. And so you might have made a statement and you're saying, well, I didn't mean it that way. That really is secondary. How you mean it is secondary to the hurt that those words might have caused the person. That's primary. And so I think this is where we have to get into understanding how to apologize well, that defending ourselves first should not be the order of the day, that understanding and healing and contributing to the healing of the other person is what's first important. It's over trying to validate ourselves. But understanding proper communication and taking ownership for our words, no matter how we meant them, it's always more important of how the impact of them is so much more important than the intention of them.
It's interesting you say that because, of course, well, not of course, but one of the things that I really have have tried to weave into all of these topics around communication is that the bottom line of communication is to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because people matter,
Yeah.
right? Why do I want to connect? Yes, people matter. Why? Because I want to love people, right? That's the bottom line. And I think it's
Right.
interesting if we kind of take that 30,000 foot view and look at what we're saying, even if we don't understand what I've just said has offended you, if we really say, no, I really want to take this seriously because I want to connect. And yet what we've just said causes disconnection. I think you're right. That humble posture of help me understand how what I just said is offensive to you. Like, I really want to understand that better and not get our knickers in a twist about that. Do you use that kind of statement in Virginia? I'm from Canada. Knickers in a twist.
Nancy, I have not quite heard, listen, I have not heard knickers in a twist. I have heard panties in a bunch.
Panties in a bunch.
That's what I know about, but I get it. It's, Canadian, Virginia, hey, we can make it all work.
I love it. But you know what I mean, right? So
I do. I think it's really, really important that, that we be healers for each other. Now, we can't always do that because some people are going to just decide to stay offended about things, but, I think that there's a way to go about things to bring healing if we can in terms of our communication with other people.
I love it. I love it. And so, one of the things that comes to mind, of course, is, like, let your words be, you come before the God of heaven. Don't just ramble. Like, essentially, he's saying, say what you really mean. Say what you really mean. Friends, I'm so excited to share with you that registration is officially open for my new course, Awaken. Awaken is for women who are fed up with walking through their lives half asleep with little to no purpose or direction. It's for women who are ready to shrug off the toxic expectations and limitations they've taken on from the church, loved ones, and themselves, and instead step into full, godly 3D womanhood. It's for those who are thinking right now, yes, I'm so ready to take off my mask, get honest, and live fully alive. This work won't be easy. It's going to get gritty and messy. But I guarantee if you stick with it, you'll come out on the other end truly awake and unmasked with a vision in hand that brings you joy, purpose, and direction. Join me this February for Awaken. Learn more and register for Awaken by visiting nancyhickslive.com/awaken or finding the link in our show notes. Okay, so when we nail down, by God's grace, what we really mean to say, tell me now, let's pivot. I'm going to make a statement and I just want you to agree or disagree and then run with it, Cece.
Okay.
Here's the statement. Actions speak louder than words. Say what you mean and do what you say you're going to mean. Can you just comment on that? So actions speak louder than words. You agree with that?
Partly.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. In most instances, I would say actions speak louder than words. But sometimes if the action is correct or in the right direction or what it should have been, but the words around the action are not what they should be, then a lot of times the action itself is diminished. And it's almost like this. It's almost like if you are bringing, let's say you go grocery shopping and you have all these groceries and you come in the house and you ask your children and your husband to help you bring the groceries in. If they decide everybody's going to help bring in the groceries, but there was a lot of attitude about it. Oh, I don't want to get these groceries. Oh, why can't you do it yourself? Oh, I don't have time. But the groceries got brought in, as opposed to if the groceries got brought in and everybody ran to the door and said, Mom, babe, let me help you. Thank you for going to get these groceries for us. We are happy to help you. There is an impact that words have that accompany a lot of time action. And those words can either bless or curse the action, I want to say. And so in most instances, I would say that actions speak louder than words, but words are powerful. And words really speak to the heart. Out of the mouth, the heart speaks. Words really matter and impact people emotionally and physically. So we're not just mechanics, we're not just going around like technically doing things like bringing in the groceries. There's a heart that comes with action. And what comes out of that heart related to those actions are almost just as important as the actions.
Right. So I guess the goal, of course, is congruence, right? That I'm going to
Yeah.
really be this woman who doesn't feel under compulsion to say a whole bunch of stuff that she doesn't really mean or doesn't know what she really means. She's just maybe parroting stuff she's heard all her life or trying to appease people in the situation. But instead, the woman who's listening, the person who's listening, and for our children, how old is your little Halo?
Yeah, my daughter is 10. My little boy is 4.
Honor. Is that his Honor and Halo?
That's right.
For both of them, right? So how do you instill in them? Because we want them to be confident and we want to make sure that there's congruence in what you say and that you honor your words with your actions, with what you do. So how do you instill them as a mom in those little lambs? Not so little now.
Yeah. You know what? Integrity is really big for me. On a children's level, integrity just simply means, and this is what I try to teach my kids all the time, do what you say you're going to do. And if you can't do it, communicate that you can't do it, right? Do what you say you're going to do because God is always watching. And so if I, for example, tell you that bedtime is at 9, but I come in at 9:15 and you're still like trying to hide under your covers with your iPad, then your lack of integrity in those moments at my house is what gets you in trouble. The lack of integrity will get you in trouble with me faster than anything else.
So what does that look like? When you're training these young ones and you're so a woman of integrity and want to instill it's so important to you. So again, that congruence between say what you mean and do it.
Let your yay be yay, your nay be nay.
Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you, I really do try to do what my grandmother did for me, which is to train my children with the word of God. And so, we talk about, for example, lying. We talk about what the scripture says about telling the truth. We talk about integrity from a biblical point of view, because this is not just about momming. I'm just a mentor hoping to point you toward your biggest parent, and that is God, right? What does God expect from you? And so my grandmother literally had a Bible verse for everything. Like if I can't find my shoe under the bed, a Bible verse for everything. And I didn't even really mean to. I just now almost have a Bible verse for everything, But I think more than anything, I try to teach my children by the example, by impartation, by the way that I live my life. My children very much are part of my everyday life, especially now in the midst of COVID. So they see me working, they see me interacting with people, they hear me on phone calls, they see me in meetings. And I try to demonstrate what it is for my yay to be yay, my nay to be nay, to do what I say that I'm going to do, to apologize when that is necessary, to have a standard. And if I don't meet it, fix it in whatever way that I can. I try to live that.
I'm thinking about how critical that is. I'm thinking about stories that I have, from my upbringing and again, my mom was an amazing mom, single mom, but I remember, someone would call and maybe my mom didn't want to talk to them, or someone in the house didn't want to talk to whoever was on the other end of the phone. And they would run into the bathroom, jump into the bathtub, like just stand in the tub and say, tell them I'm in the tub. And I remember looking at this and thinking, that's called lying. Okay, so integrity, to your point. So in terms of instilling it in our kids, tell me what happens in your life, Cece, when someone has said something to you and then they haven't followed through. How do you handle that?
I deal with them differently, to be honest. Listen, everybody has a bad day. Everybody is has moments in life where, things aren't working well and they're not living up to what they would hope they would be living up to or able to do what they would hope they would be able to do. But there's a woman, her name is Dr. Maya Angelou. A lot of people would have read her books. She's a poet. She would always say, when a person shows you who they are, believe them the first time.
Yes.
Now, I try to slather on a little bit of grace, because we're all just human. But when somebody shows you a time or two that they don't follow up, or that they drop the ball and don't acknowledge that, or they don't communicate with you, you have to believe that they are where they are at that time of their life for whatever reason. And then you have to make different decisions about how you engage. I mean, there are definitely people, family members, that I've had to do that to. Doesn't mean I don't love you, doesn't mean I don't like you. It just means on these particular things, we can't work together, or we're not seeing eye to eye. So we can't go in the same direction. And so how do I deal with it? I change up my plan. I change up the plan. If the plan was to work with you on this and you show me you can't communicate, then we can't work together on that. And in the future, unless I see something really, really drastically different, we won't work together on anything else. Once I see a pattern, I believe you. And then I operate accordingly.
That's really good. And that gets to the heart of communication, right? It's like, if my whole thing is to connect with you and you start clipping those lines of connection,
then I can't trust you.
Right?
Can't trust you. Can't trust you. We don't have anything to work on.
Right. So that's the kind of stuff where I'm thinking, Lord, help us. God, help us. If we begin to keep clipping, I get to operate in my own little world. I get to do things my way. And the impact it has on you, the impact it has on my children, the impact it has on whomever, it's irrelevant, because I get to operate by my own rules. And I get to say what I want to say when I want to say it, to navigate a very maybe sometimes short-term result or short-term situation without thinking about the long and the end game, the long term. You think?
Mm-hmm. I do. A lot of times, for those of us who identify as Christian, we cheapen our identity with our character flaws. And so we want to be in community and we want to say, well, she's a Christian, he's a Christian, so I want to do this with this person or work with this person. But your Christian identity has to be matched with your integrity, your level of integrity, with communication skills, with emotional maturity, with psychological stability. It has to be matched in order for us to move forward on a mission, right? And so we have to stop almost hiding behind Christian identity and understanding, ultimately, we got to line up in character too. We can't just line up in Christian identity, profession of faith.
Oh, I love it. And now it's my turn to say, preach.
Preach.
Hey, listen, can you tell us, for our listeners again, so what? Why does this matter so much? Why does saying what we mean and being people of integrity by saying what we mean and doing what we say we're going to do, what's the so what for our listener today from you, Cece?
Because what we say impacts how people feel. Because what we say either builds or tears down. What we say, so what? Because we are souls living in a body, and words have impact on people's souls all day long, every day. And so we want the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts to be acceptable unto God, because they do have such impact on our witness and on the lives of people that we know and don't know. And so it very deeply matters what we say, how we live, what we do.
I love it. Do you have any projects coming up that you can tell us about?
Yeah.
And how can people connect with you?
Yeah. Well, just came out with an album called Alive that I'm really, really excited about. I hope everybody will take a peek at it on all digital platforms, Amazon, iTunes, Apple, Spotify. So I'm really excited about Alive. That project means a lot to me. And folks can follow me. You can visit in my website, cecejonesdavis.com. You can follow me on all social media outlets at my handles are all Cece Jones-Davis.
Oh, I love it. Cece, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today about So What? Why it matters.
Nancy,
I'm really
thank
grateful.
you. You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Nancy. God bless you.
God bless you right back. I loved having this conversation with Cece Jones-Davis today. And I have to tell you, one of the things that really has left its mark on me is her very style of communication, which of course matters, right? Her style is methodical, it's thoughtful, and I think given the topic, say what you mean and mean what you say. Say what you mean and live it. I think it comes out in the very way that she thinks about what you've just asked her. She thinks about what she's saying and she says it. And I think that's because she doesn't want to say things she doesn't really mean. The so what moment that I found while I was talking to Cece was one of the first things that she said, which was, by our very words, we want to always tell the truth. And I know that as you're listening, you're thinking, yeah, sometimes we can overtly lie, but maybe that's not the case, right? Maybe you're not overtly lying, but we're not also telling the truth. You may be thinking, well, I don't get the difference. Dr. David Benner says, it's not so much that we're telling lies, it's that sometimes we're living lies. So we say these things that we actually believe we mean, or we say just a bunch of words that are just fillers. But if we step back and really think about what we're saying, is it congruent with what we really believe? Is it congruent with what we really mean? And so my takeaway, based on what Cece has shared about telling the truth, my takeaway is really pause a little bit more, Nancy. I'm a very verbal person. Pause a little bit more and make sure I'm not just saying something to fill the space, but using the words to convey truth and then actually living it out, which proves that I really did mean what I said. It proves the truth. So I think that was really powerful for me today. I'm going to take that away and I'm going to really think about it and put it into practice. And I hope you do too. And I want to say a great big thank you to my podcast team at Four Eyes Media. That's Amy Kerr, my producer, Caitlin Hine, who books all these fantastic guests, and Laura Knightsling, our executive producer, for helping me bring this episode to you. Next week, we're launching a brand new series that I'm so excited to bring to you. It's all about how to take care of your most important asset, yourself. So come back next week. And until then, live for what matters.
Thanks for joining Nancy for another episode of So What? Why It Matters. Come back next week for more lively conversation and answers to those so what moments in your life. And be sure to subscribe to the So What podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the show, please give us a review and tell us why. And if you don't, as Nancy would say, so what? Just kidding. All your reviews matter. So until next time, live for what matters.